Anyway, thank you for coming to the Monthly Connection. We're doing this every third Thursday of the month where we will have a featured storyteller who's gone through the whole TMI Project workshop before, who's told a story at a performance. I was going to say at a live performance, but now we will probably start featuring Zoom performers also. Um, and we will have a conversation with them, and then we will have them read their story. We'll get to hear a story from the TMI archives, and talk a little bit about what the experience was like, and then we will actually go through a little bit of a TMI Project writing workshop, a mini writing workshop. So I welcome you, and I think that almost all of you, with I think the exception of Mark actually, and Mark, welcome. Mark's from another storytelling organization, have had personal experience with TMI Project in some way, at the very least have been to a show. But we've been around for 10 years, and we're a storytelling organization that inspires people to tell what we call the TMI parts of their stories, which we identify as the parts that they usually leave out because they're too ashamed or embarrassed to share them. And when they're brave enough to include those parts in their stories, we feel like those are the kinds of stories that ignite human connection, because we all have some part of our own story that we're holding on to, that we feel a little ashamed or embarrassed by, that we're afraid to tell out of fear of being judged. So I just want to welcome you all and thank you for being here, and let you know about how the night will unfold. So before we get started, we will just go over a couple little Zoom things. I'm sure everybody's turning into a Zoom expert at this point. We're all starting to get zoomed out, but let's see. If you go to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see there's a speaker view and a gallery view. When Tamika is ready to share her story, if you want to go to the speaker view to get like more of a performer experience, you're welcome to. And then when we go back to the workshop, you can go to the gallery view. But before I get into too much more of that, I would like to introduce you to our featured storyteller this week. It is Tamika Dunkley. Welcome, Tamika. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, you guys. I really appreciate it.
I'm really glad that you're able to be here. We were just saying before you arrived, the audience, we were kind of catching up before you guys got here, that Tamika was in a performance in February of this year, the most recent Black Stories Matter performance, and it feels like it was a lifetime ago. And Tamika was just saying, in a lot of ways, it was a lifetime ago. Tamika, just give us a little bit, what has changed for you since that performance? Like, how has this new world impacted you personally?
There's so many ways. So first of all, wearing a mask all the time. As an RN, the one reason I didn't go into the surgical unit and always do surgeries and prep surgeries was because of the mask, because I feel like I'm going to pass out after about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge challenge for me. Every time I go out, I'm like, as soon as I get out into the open air pushing a shopping cart full of groceries, I'm like, hold on, let me inch it with my lips. Let me inch it with my lips down so I can breathe. So that's a huge thing. And then just seeing all of the struggles. I mean, with our business, that's just, we've had to adapt how we do things. You know, there's new protocols for serving food. There's new protocols for just sanitize. There's just so many new protocols for that. In healthcare, they've changed the rules so many times. What used to be true for the umpteen years prior is now no longer true or no longer being followed. So what you were trained from school to now until pandemic, we're not all following that thing. We're following the new CDC guidelines, which, you know, says you can double mask and just using masks all the time instead of stripping them all off at the door, which we used to do with all contact precautions. Rooms, you take everything off, the gown and the booties and the hair bonnets and all of those things. Sometimes they're being reused. Sometimes, you know, so there's so many ways that it's affected all of us.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that night, the night of your show, and it was it was packed. I mean, we packed the house, and there was a line down the street of people waiting to get in, and everybody was this close to each other online to enter the church, and then sitting so close to each other and sharing a microphone. And our from our organization's perspective, our whole world is working in workshop spaces where people are sitting close together in an intimate setting, and then live performances and events. So we also had to change everything. And I'm really glad that this platform works for us, but I also miss being in person with all of you so much. There's just a feeling in the room that's so special when we gather and share stories in that way. And that night was no exception. It was really quite magical.
Yeah, it was a beautiful night. Honestly, it was very liberating in so many ways, and just the fear of it not being able to be that type of environment again, just the community and everybody just coming together and existing and being. That's definitely something that's a huge worry for me.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people.
Well, and I can see too, though, that everyone's creativity is really blossoming right now and finding ways to connect, given these crazy circumstances, that everybody's still just trying to find ways to make connections. I was thinking about that night that there was something that I didn't know about your experience until the Q&A, because I wasn't your workshop leader. You worked with Micah and Dara. So when somebody asked you, why did you take the workshop? Your answer was
I wasn't supposed to be there. I was not supposed to be there.
It's the first time we had that answer, I think, actually. That didn't you kind of get like hijacked in a way?
Yeah, so my husband had texted me to come, and I forgot exactly I think he was coming to have me pick something up, but we had taken one car to Kingston, and I went and ran errands. And so I come there and I walk in, and I've never been in the greenhouse before, and I walk in and I see everybody, all my friends are sitting at the table. They're like, oh, come on, we're about to have lunch, come and do this story. And Micah says, oh, here's your packet. I'm like, what? I'm like, oh, okay. And I just looked at my husband and I said, oh, okay, this is what you had in mind. So,
what, did he have that planned?
No, he didn't have that. I don't remember what exactly he had texted me for, but he just, I think he thought that it was a half a day or something happened. He said, oh, you can come now.
Well, I'm so glad it worked out that way, because we got the blessing of being able to hear your story as a result of you just stopping by at that moment and being totally willing, being willing to stay and being willing to go through the process. What was the process like for you in terms of going through the exercises and finding which story you're going to tell?
It was great. I'm going to tell you, the process was incredible, because I think we were so blessed to have such an incredible, powerful group. And it's so beautiful to hear some of these stories that what people have gone through and how they've overcome things and the struggles that they've had. And it really is, like you said, an empowering thing from a human perspective to know that either you're not alone in struggle, or somebody else has experienced something that you couldn't even fathom and they're still standing. So for me, I think that the prompts they were such interesting tools, because I said, how is this prompt going to go with this prompt, and to see it all come together, and have the team really guide you through that and asking those questions. And it was really, and trying to pull a story and connect two stories in one was beautiful.
Yeah. It's interesting. After I've been leading these workshops for 10 years now. We started in 2010, so we've got a decade of doing this now under our belts. But one of the things that I've noticed that's always strikes me is that regardless of which prompts we offer, people have a story that they really have to tell. And so they will get that story out regardless of which prompt we're using. So you'll find a way, regardless of what we're asking for, to get the story out that you really need to tell. And then it's our job to be listening and making connections and asking the right questions so that we can have the content that we need to string it all together. But yours came out really beautifully. And there were a lot of ways that I identified with it. I shared with you a little bit after you were done, but I would like to have you read it for all of the people who are here. A few more people signed on. I see that Tyrone's here, who is also in that show with you.
Mm-hmm.
Martin is here, who is in that show with you. Drew signed on, so welcome everybody. Nice to have you all here. If you guys are not yet in speaker view, I suggest going to speaker view so that you can really have the experience of seeing Tamika tell her story. And after you're done, we'll have a few more questions, you and I, a little bit more conversation. And then as you guys are listening, think about any questions that you might have, because we will take questions from you as well. And so if you would like to ask questions about the process or about the story, you can ask anything you want. And Tamika can always say, I don't feel comfortable answering that. And that's how we keep the dialogue open. I also just forgot to introduce, because we got off to a fast start. Blake is here. He's our operations manager. He's going to be helping and putting content into the chat too. So if we mention anything that needs a link for you to easily click to, Blake will be there to help you. And if you have any questions, you can point them in his direction. So thanks, Blake, for being here and helping. And with no further ado, Tamika, you can take it away.
All right. Throughout my scholastic career, I'm praised for being a wonderful straight-A student. I'm the only student body president and leader in multiple choirs and bands. I spend 6 to 7 days at church. I attend every Bible study, worship service, and benefit. From a young age, I'm taught to walk with a certain persona. There was a level of professionalism and grace that I'm expected to carry myself with, no matter how I feel or who I really want to be. Who I am doesn't matter as long as my family appears to be perfect. So much so that people began to label us as the Sultan family show. But now I'm 15 years old, sitting in the car parked behind the church. I take a deep breath. I look down at my belly and then quickly into the rearview mirror. I shift my focus from myself to the double pane doors. Through the stained glass, I can see all the people tentatively watching the pastor at the pulpit. I want to go back home. I have avoided this moment for several months, and the internal buildup is all but unbearable. I can no longer hide myself. I know public shaming is in store for me, but I'm praying it won't be as bad as I expect. As I slowly climb up the steps, holding myself on the banister, our eyes meet. I see the look of shock and disappointment immediately sweep over his face. How far along are you? The deacon asks. I say I'm 7 months. I take a deep breath and I brace myself for this long journey. I somehow survived the next few months and triumph over the scorn from all the people in my life. Being the daughter of a pastor or any prominent person in the community is not easy. When you grow up being surrounded by the church and find yourself pregnant out of wedlock, it's shameful enough. But being a pregnant teenager makes it even worse. People feel free to comment on any of the challenges in your life. It's as though one mistake makes everyone feel they all of a sudden know your story. I'm well aware of the hypocrisy. I know of their deepest secrets, the things they struggle with, the things they go to counseling for. You see, all pastors talk to each other behind closed doors, or not so closed doors. I wonder if they know their secrets aren't so secret anymore. All of that doesn't matter anyway. They all feel they have a right to pass judgment on my life. Now I'm no good, I'm troubled, a bad influence to their children. Now the same people my life has been built around see me as less than, incompetent, and label me as fast. It's an epidemic, people say. Why would you do that? As if I don't know that your husband was trying to take me home with him at the gas station just a few months prior. As if I don't know that you are buying drugs right after church. As if your daughter isn't the one who encouraged me to do what she was doing. I'm not the type to confront people. I'm not going to fight back. I'm not going to put their business out there. The truth doesn't matter. I allow others to create my story as the months pass and my belly grows. I remove myself from the line of fire. I stay to myself and most importantly, stay away from them. Finally, a few months later, I walk back into the church with my baby, only a few weeks old. I take the front entrance, trembling inside, but I do my best to muster up a false confidence, prepared to confront the naysayers and the so-called do-gooders. As soon as I enter A woman I have quite literally known my whole life pulls me in. She brings me to the front of the stage and holds my hand. I feel every cell in my body pulsing. I can't think, I can barely stand. I know she feels the sweat on my palms as she grips my hand. The baby feels like a bag of cement in my arms. Dear Lord, I pray for your heavenly protection for Tamika. I pray that you cover her and keep her from the path of sin. I pray that she will no longer be living as a sinner, but keep the trials of the flesh far from her. She will no longer live in disgrace from you. She continues, but I tune her out as I keep my eyes closed and I feel compelled to blurt out her truths. That her daughter, only slightly older than me, has done much worse than me and worse than she could ever imagine. The difference is I was not covering up, shying away from my mistakes. I'm facing them head on. She's a white woman with a black husband, just like my parents. There was always some underlying competition that they had subjected me to, and now I have provided the fuel that she needs to publicly shame me. After this berating ceases, I stare out in front of the sea of faces. There are over 300 people in attendance that morning. I go to the bathroom and I stare at my son until the only thing I can see is the outline of his head through my tears. I let him know that I am not going to be what they condemn me to be. I will rise above that. I see nothing but love and innocence staring back at me, and I feel peace. I decide in that moment that anyone who wants to tell me that he is anything but a blessing doesn't have my best interest at heart. My whole world becomes him, but despite my promise to him and myself, I struggle. I struggle through school. I'm still an above average student, but who's going to watch the baby? How am I going to get to and from school? How am I going to provide food for him as he grows? As my parents try to support me in their own way, I can no longer conform to their idea of what's right. I can no longer be subjected to the phony understanding or perception of who God is or who I am. They have to be who they are, and I have to be myself. And as a result, I found myself homeless a little over a year later. And because I was so young, there are no services available to me. I walk out of the DSS building, pushing my 1-year-old child in the middle of winter with nowhere to go. I find a coffee shop half a mile away, and I use my last $1.25 to buy a cup of tea so I can sit there. That semester, I stay in 9 places and somehow manage to attend and pass all my classes. I know that if I'm to fulfill my promises and create any resemblance of stability in my son's life, I have to be able to provide for him financially. I study nursing, a profession I never wanted, but it would enable me to care for my son with a 2-year degree. So at 19 years old, I officially become a registered nurse. I excel with my studies, attaining a bachelor's degree less than a year later, and being placed in a supervisory position within that same year. I named my son Amittai. Its Hebrew meaning is upright and truthful. I named him for the purpose I saw his life to be when he was born. Now a teen himself, an avid reader, enrolled in the early college program, he is living up to his powerful name. With the support of my family, I've been able to rekindle my dreams and pursue my own purpose. I continue to work as a nurse from time to time, but not because I have to, it's because I want to. My husband and I own a successful food company. Because of this, we're able to create a nonprofit organization that allows us to help others change their lives' narratives and pursue their dreams. Over the years and through many trials and tribulations, I have developed my own relationship with God, the universe, our ancestors, whatever name you choose. But most importantly, I found myself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tamika.
Thank you.
Heard again. I don't know what just happened. I lost you. There we go. I had so many thoughts just hearing it for the second time, and I wondered. I feel like there's something so universal and part of the challenge of that moment where your parents, that they have one set of values and you're starting to understand that your values are different, and somehow at such a young age you figure out a way to choose yourself, to decide that you're going to stick with what feels right for you instead of stay with them under their roof, even though there may have been things that would have been provided for you. You're like, your sense of self and your core was so strong. And I just wonder if you can talk about that a little bit. I feel like that's something that sometimes can take people until they're much older to be able to find that within themselves.
So it's interesting because my parents, when they had first gotten together, they didn't necessarily see eye to eye with like religious values and how they wanted to operate. And my mother had actually left my father when I was 2 and moved to Hawaii because he was playing Christian hymns in the house, and she couldn't take it anymore. And she came back because I ended up almost dying and getting pneumonia. We came back and we were all good. I didn't die. But, you know, so there has always been, I think, this struggle that I've seen my parents go through, and, you know, trying to find my own sense of self. And, you know, I personally believe of God, and that there's a higher power and all this thing, but I don't believe in some of the traditional Christian teachings. But there's amazing lessons in the Bible that are universal. Don't steal, don't cheat, don't, you know, don't do bad things, essentially. So, you know, for me, just seeing that struggle and then trying to devise my own way and listening to the pastors 6 days a week and hearing what's going on, and just knowing that there is so much truth to it, but there's just stuff that doesn't jive with my spirit. I think that it was just like an internal calling that I had to, you know, I had to just be true to myself.
Yeah. Your inner voice is so strong, and it comes through so clearly in this piece. The other moment in this story that just really strikes me each time I hear it is the moment where you're standing in the church holding your baby and have this like very clear, almost like a moment of grace, where you're just like, if somebody doesn't have my baby's best interest in mind, they're not looking out for me. And I feel like that was just such a beautiful moment in the story. You know, I had shared with you after the show that my mom had also gotten pregnant as a teenager, and she was sent to a Catholic home for pregnant girls and women and forced to give her child up for adoption. Wow. So just the issue of teen pregnancy and adoption and being shamed for being in those circumstances really impacted our whole family line. And she was sitting next to me during the show and just wept through your entire story. I know that it was so healing for her to hear another woman talk honestly and truthfully about going through that experience, and also claiming herself as she tells the story. So I personally thank you for sharing it from just her daughter's perspective.
Thank you so much, because it's crazy, because as so many women came up to me and said, you told my story, you told my story. And these are women who are in their 60s and 70s and 30s and 40s. And like it spanned the test of time.
Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that happened.
Yes, it was so healing for me in so many ways, because it was something that, you know, self-shaming, and, you know, like I had to make, I'm not going to let anybody tell me or do, you know, this big barrier. And I realized through the TMI Project that so much of what we go through and our own shames and, you know, people's perception, we ingrain in our DNA, and that becomes part of who we are, but we don't have to be that. We can make the conscious decision to be who we need to be and be who we want to be, and not be afraid or ashamed of it. Was it a situation that was ideal? No, but look at where I was able to take it. Look at where all of these women were able to take it. It's not who you are in that moment, it's who you're trying to be and who you're progressing to be. Yeah. And that's just something that, you know, it brought me to tears, because I told my husband, I said, should I really share this story? This is like, so like, this is my baby, you know, this is my secret, you know, people who know me now don't even know. And, you know, it was just so much emotional thing where, I probably had a 4-hour conversation in tears, and he was like, you know, if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. But I think that it would touch some people's lives, and it did. And it was just, wow. You know, it helped me.
I did not, I mean, I haven't talked to you since after the show, so I didn't know that so many people came up to you and that you had that experience afterwards, or
Yeah.
that you were even so nervous to tell it before. One of the questions that I had actually was, I'm pretty sure some of your kids were there, right?
Yeah.
In the audience. And had you ever told them about what you had been through?
Well, my youngest had fallen asleep, so that was probably good. But my son was in the audience, and I asked him. I said, "Well, how do you feel about it?" He's like, "Well, I knew it all before, so I'm not worried about it." It's a, I. But that's just shows I'm very honest with all of my kids. They
Uh-huh.
know, in my tight knit circle. So he's like, "Oh, well, I know." Okay, thanks, honey. Thank you. So, but he was very touched by, Rita's story, obviously, and just
Uh-huh.
her whole transition. So he was touched by several people's stories and could, put himself in those shoes.
Yeah, yeah. I wondered, one of the questions that I always like to ask is, especially if you're writing a story about something that you went through quite some time ago, is if you could tell that version of yourself, that younger version of yourself, something now from your adult perspective,
Hmm.
what would you share with her?
It's going to be okay. At that point, I didn't know. I was, especially during the whole homeless scenario. And I just remembered we were talking about chemistry earlier and I was taking chemistry, and I lived in 9 different houses in a semester. And it was just like, just knowing that it's going to be okay, and your baby's going to be okay, and you're going to be okay. So just the unknowing part was hard for me.
So tell us a little bit about where your life has gone since. Like you mentioned quite a few things in the story, about getting your nursing degree. You're still doing some of that work. And I'd like to hear about that, but also about the nonprofit that you mentioned. You mentioned that you're able to help people shift their life narrative, which is really what we're working towards also. So I'd love to hear about that.
So Season Gives is our brand new, we just got approved in January, 501c3. And we focus on minority and underprivileged entrepreneurship mainly. We also focus on bringing diversity to the community, but we try to encourage people, to young and old, to really follow their passion and teach ownership before teaching being an employee. So it's great to be an employee, it's great to be employed, but to know as a minority that you're able to own something. It's not just a distant dream. And there's certain practices that are just good business practices that can be applied to anything. That's something that we don't see enough.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who are, doing it, and business owners, a lot of times they're so busy they don't have time to really focus on getting people adjusted and showing them how to mentoring them essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge piece of what we're doing. And then we also do, hopefully, we'll see, the Caribbean Carnival in Saugerties. So that happens in August. And that's brought so much just amazing talk in terms of inclusion and diversity in a town that's famous for being very, very racist,
Mm-hmm.
and very, very close knit. And then we're also going to be doing a Latin festival in Kingston, hopefully in
I
September.
know, fingers crossed, right?
Fingers crossed.
September we can all do those things.
Yeah.
You are getting some questions coming through the chat too. So Drew has a
Oh,
question. How do you share or teach other young mothers how to be resilient? Do you have any guidance for all of us who are working with young women? Um, I know Drew and I have also talked about working with young women around issues of confidence and,
mhm.
a strong sense of self. Do you have any guidance around that?
Well, I think that a huge piece of that is to have somebody who's consistently available and can just be listening ears and then give advice, as needed.
Mhm.
So something that I really wish that I had growing up, and I've talked to a lot of young women, and they've had the same thing, is just having a consistent person that actually cared, and it's better even if they don't have a familial tie, because a lot of times a lot of mixed emotions will come in that, and there's a lot of preconception. So having somebody, like I just had a young lady in Florida that called me over a similar topic, and just being a listening ear sometimes, and letting somebody hear themselves and saying, hey, did you hear what you really just said? You actually came up with your own solution, because many times you have your own solution right in your head. You just have to work through that. So
I know with the young people that I work with in my life, it can feel very frustrating at times. Like, you keep showing up, you keep showing up, you keep showing up, and there doesn't feel like there's any progress at all.
it's the
And
wall.
then out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden something happens and you're like, oh my God, there is an impact that's being made. Something's happening here, but it takes a lot of patience.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The consistency is so key, because they're not going to get it until they get it. And they have to come to that realization on their own. You
Yeah.
can only say so much and keep those wheels turning so much. But eventually, many of them do. And you just stay there and you check up on them.
Twinkle has a comment more than a question, but she says, incredibly brave. I still am not vocal about my difference of spirituality with my family. And I think that that's probably something that a lot of people struggle with, just when you have a difference of belief with your family or loved ones, whether it's about religion, spirituality, or otherwise. It's very challenging to just say who you are and stand in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, Alexandra wrote in, knowing you're a strong woman going through an obstacle that strengthens you, does it hurt or any other feelings to hear other women that struggle say that they can't do it anymore?
No,
No?
no, because I get it. No, not at all. Because it really, when you're in it and you're really truly struggling and you're feeling that, in nursing. So in nursing, you have a pain scale, and somebody will say, okay, well, I have a pain of 10 on 10, which is the worst pain you've ever felt in your entire life. Me as a nurse or somebody as a doctor can't tell you that you're not feeling that pain. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it.
Mm.
And then it's our decision to help you work through that. And it's the same thing in life. If somebody is going through that go through and they feel like they can't do it anymore, I sympathize with that. I'm going to still encourage you to persevere and let you know that yes, you can. You're stronger than you think, because I've been there a million times before. But I sympathize with it. That's all I can say, is I get it.
You just mentioned the pain scale and being a nurse, and I just want to say that we definitely honor you for the work that you're doing as a nurse, especially in this time. And just acknowledge that we're all on this platform because there's something going on in the world, that this is not how we usually meet up, and you are right in the midst of it. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're facing and going through?
So I think the biggest struggle that almost all of the medical professionals that I've talked to, that I've been in contact with, is them changing the rules, the CDC, and us having to change the rules and adapt for what's available versus what's best practice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really big struggle when you've done something for umpteen years and you've done it the same way, knowing that there is some type of safety because it's been tested times thousands and thousands of people for hundreds of years, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge struggle for everybody. And then just the not knowing, there's no cure, there's no vaccine, there's nothing, there's no treatment, there's no real treatment. So that's a big challenge for us.
Yeah, the unknown and not knowing how long things are going to last or how things are going to unfold is very unnerving for everyone. But thank you. Thank you so much for showing up and doing that work, and for showing up here and sharing your story. We all really appreciate it. So
Thank you so much.